Hi guys, it's Marcelo Nostroza here, back again for another video. This time I'll be talking about Sherlock, Season 2, Episode 3, Reichenbach Falls, with my good friend Geek in Review. So Geek, with all that pomp and circumstance out of the way, what were your thoughts on the Season 2 finale of Sherlock?
Yeah, it sets up and it delivers, and it's a really clever idea the way that stuff's done with like the assassins and Moriarty being an actor, pretending to be an actor. A lot of things that they set up and it all pays off.
I really love the way that this episode starts with John talking to the shrink again because the first shot that we see in Sherlock, well, we see two shots to start off. We see John Watson having a stroke, or well, not having a stroke, having a panic attack in bed. And then we see him talking to the shrink. So it was really cool to see him back with the shrink. But I must admit, the first time I saw this episode years ago on Netflix, I was like, wait a minute. John is talking to the shrink. Something must have happened. And the fact that he couldn't say it, it was really supreme acting by Martin Freeman in that specific scene. You could see it on his face. It like physically pained him to say, Sherlock is dead. That's the giant hook for the entire episode.
Well, yeah, I'd read a bit of the books as a kid, not all the books, just some of them. And I do remember the fight because it's at a river or a waterfall called the Reichenbach Fall. So they fight like kind of on the cliff under the waterfall. And I think they done it in like the 70s British, maybe they done it in one of the 70s British versions as well. So I sort of knew that, it was possible that he could die. And I think around the time, I might be wrong, it was around when Martin Freeman was doing The Hobbit. So there was rumours that he wouldn't be back.
When Sherlock was on the air, I wasn't watching the show, so I knew nothing about Martin Friedman potentially not coming back for another season of Sherlock. It would have been really interesting to see if he wouldn't have come back. What do you think they would have done if he wouldn't have come back?
They wouldn't have done it. They could have done like one episode of Sherlock and Mycroft. But no, they wouldn't have done it. Like, they need both of them for it. It's the chemistry between them.
You hinted at the name of this episode, and I thought that the way that they visualized the namesake of this episode when Sherlock is basically given a choice. Either you jump or everybody you love in your entire life dies just in a second. I really like the way that they did that because they could have done a traditional thing, which a lot of the movies and a lot of the TV miniseries have done. When they choose to tackle this episode, and they have their version of Sherlock fight with their version of Moriarty in a river, and then one of them goes over. The way that this episode chose to present Sherlock with that situation was fascinating. What did you think about the whole choice that Sherlock has to endure?
Yeah, well, to go back to like Moriarty's plan, Moriarty is very like the Joker, but his plan is sort of not, because the Joker's plan is to expose Batman as Bruce Wayne. It's the opposite. It's to expose Sherlock as something that he's not and make people believe a lie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, this for me, out of the six that we've watched so far, is the one that flows the best in terms of the story and the characters.
In the beginning of this episode, Moriarty is free, and he chooses to break into
the Tower of London, a prison, and a bank.
With a single phone. He systematically cripples, specific places throughout the city, and I was like, what kind of a mad genius can do this?
What's even more impressive than that is when he writes "Get Sherlock" on the glass backwards, he does it as quickly as I could do it normally. He just does it it's so quick. And I was watching it going, his coordination must be amazing because I couldn't do that backwards anywhere near that quickly.
When the museum begins to shut down and the glass breaks, or he breaks the glass with the fire extinguisher, and I love the point when he sits in the chair. And and the police come in, and he's sitting in the chair with the crown on. But the thing that really threw me for a loop, and you can tell me how you thought about this, is that when his trial began, it really surprised me that he didn't have any defense. He just wanted to be on trial to sort of show off his capabilities as a criminal to the rest of the world. You want to go to prison just to show the entire criminal world what your capabilities are as a consulting criminal?
Yeah, I get what I never thought about it like that, but I get what you mean. I think if they had shown his defense against Sherlock, Sherlock would have made the guy look stupid, so you would have known the outcome of the trial. Whereas if you don't see it, it is a shock that he gets off with it, because obviously you expect him to get sent down and then have some sort of plan to escape or get Sherlock from inside, but it's not. He gets to walk about.
When Sherlock is presented with the choice of the episode, Sherlock is standing there on the ledge, and to the last second, he's trying to negotiate with Moriarty to find some way out of this. But what Moriarty does to ensure that Sherlock jumps was completely. I mean, that really took my breath away, because normally they both go over the cliff. The fact that he blew his brains out was like, oh my God. So the only thing that this guy wanted was to beat Sherlock. And he wanted to beat him so bad that he didn't even care about his own life. What do you think about that?
Again, that's going back to the Joker, because you think about the time, it's only a few years after Heath Ledger, maybe 4 or 5, not that many. So yeah, they definitely channeled that he was. I mean, they don't really use the word. I don't think they use the word terrorist to describe him in the show, but he was more of a terrorist for everyone than he was for a threat to Sherlock. And again, not to spoil anything, but in later episodes, more of the terror aspect of him comes out, even though he seems to have passed away.
I think that he just wanted to get the best of Sherlock. And I think that he knew that he was going to have to do something drastic. He was going to have to put Sherlock in a position that he couldn't win. You know, beknownst to us, Sherlock already had a plan. At the time that this episode was released, we didn't know his plan.
Yeah, you're right. He was completely forcing his hand, but again, it was to force a lie rather than expose a truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, not to talk about the next episode at all, but it would have been interesting to see if they kept going down that route for an episode or two, that Sherlock was on the run, or there was some sort of division and he was in prison and John was on the outside. That would have been a bit more interesting, I think.
To go towards your point there, it would have been really interesting to see how Sherlock would have reacted to facing all these scrutinies and all these questions from the media and from the British government, basically.
Yeah, I'm not. I was just going to agree. I think that would have been great to see, but maybe a bit too much of a grand idea for television at the time, because we've got to remember this was 10, 11 years ago. So right. How we view television has completely changed, and how television gets made and the audience that it gets made for has completely changed as well.
If that situation would have happened, do you think that Mycroft would have recused himself? Or do you think that Mycroft would have been so vindictive to where he would have tried to prosecute his own brother?
I think he would have prosecuted him, but not out of malice or any hatred. He would have basically seen the point of view of, if he's in jail, I know what he's up to. He can only do so much in jail. And one thing I noticed about Mycroft, and I'll need to keep an eye on it for future episodes, is I think he's only in one scene, or a couple of scenes, but his main sort of, or his introductory scene in this is John goes to his club. And when he sits down with John, he doesn't blink. He blinks twice that I noticed when he talks, and once was accidental. When he's playing with his glass, he looks over and he blinks. And then just after John gets out the chair and walks away, John says something back to him, and he kind of casually blinks, and that's it. But when they're sitting down talking face to face, he does not blink. Again, it's the first time I've noticed it, so I'll keep an eye out for his next appearance.
Do you think that was a conscious choice by Mark Gatiss, or do you think that was just something he did?
I think it was a conscious choice, because he's letting you know that he means business and that he's not screwing about. The animal thing as well, that he's holding your gate, kind of looking down on you. Right.
Sort of like a Dracula, sort of like a hypnotism kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. I get where you're coming from with that. Yeah.
We've talked about before on this show how disappointed we are with the way that Sherlock's supporting characters have been treated, but to this point. But I've always been a fan of Mycroft. I really like Mycroft, and I particularly like when we first meet him and he diagnoses John with the tremor. So that's why every time Mycroft is on screen doing whatever, I always get a kick out of it. A scene very early on when Moriarty gets acquitted of these crimes for some reason, and when he gets released from police custody, he goes to see Sherlock and he sits down with Sherlock and he has a conversation with him. A sane person wouldn't do this. But then again, I was thinking, Moriarty isn't the same person. He is a high functioning sociopath. When he goes to see Sherlock and they have that conversation where Moriarty says, if you didn't have me, you would be bored to death. The only difference between you and me is that I'm interesting and you're boring. What did you think about that whole exchange?
Yeah, I mean, I knew even the first time I watched that something like this was going to happen, but in terms of the scene, I think it would have worked a lot better if they'd shot it like a play, so they're both sitting opposite each other and it doesn't cut away from that, rather than going back and forth to their faces and their hands. And I think Sherlock stands up and moves around the room at one point. But yeah, it was good, and again, it delivered because since episode one, they've been teasing this guy, and then it's the way that Marvel does it. They sort of give you little hints over 5 or 6 years. In this case, it was over 5 or 6 episodes, and then when he shows up the first time, it's great, and then they just double it this time, and it is on the next level with everything.
How did you feel about him being teased in the very, very last scene of last episode? Because I was like, really, guys, you're going to make it. You didn't have to show us that. You could have just gone right into it and we would have been fine. Or no, but do you think that we had to see that to see how he got out of prison?
That's maybe thinking about it, that's probably the thing in the episode that I like the least, because all the setups that they'd done before that were not subtle but more clever in the way that they were put into the script. It felt natural, whereas this was just sort of, here we go, this is what's happening.
Do you have any more standout moments of the episode before we get to the final piece of the episode?
Let's say I like the sort of subplot of Moriarty pretending to be an actor and having a job in kids' television. I thought that was very clever. It is hinted at, well, again, going into the next episode, that Sherlock does have fans and groupies, and you see them at the start of the next episode, but this is the sort of first meeting of him, although it's not really a fan, it's someone pretending to be a fan, but this is sort of first social media follower or whatever he has. Right. I thought that was really good, and I like the actress. She was in the IT Crowd. If you ever watched that, it was a British comedy show. She's really good on it.
Yeah, she was very, very pretty. I really don't like that hat that they chose for Sherlock. I think that thing is absurd.
But it is the hat, though.
Yeah,
they've got to put it in, and the way that they put it in was kind of it fitted in. Like, I don't think anything other than the ending was forced or rushed. And I remember the first time I watched it just thinking about, how are they going to do this next? Where is it going to go?
When I watched the show more than a couple years ago on Netflix, season 3 had already come out. So I knew going into the finale of season 2 that I was going to go right into season 3. But still, the whole tension of the last sequence of this episode was phenomenal. I thought it was really, really great. And like you, even though I didn't have to wait, I just had to wait a couple seconds. But I'm interested to see what was like for you, because you actually watched this when it was on the air. So
yeah,
were you coming up with theories and things about how Sherlock was going to basically come back to life? Because essentially we see Sherlock die in this episode, and we're like, there's no possible way that wasn't Sherlock who jumped off the building. So you're like, how did he do this?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way I can talk about it without not talking about the next episode. I thought that basically he would have faked the jump somehow, and then Mycroft could have got hold of a body, and it was simple. That's in my head. I was just going for the simple answer. And how they do it is very, very open for debate.
I really like the way that Martin Freeman, I really like the way that he played John Watson in this specific episode. Specifically in those last moments where he watched his best friend, jump to his death. And the fear and the uncertainty in his face was just so, so good. What was running through your head when Sherlock basically conceded, and he was like, to save everybody, I have to jump. Were you expecting something to happen, or were you like, okay, the show's over now, Sherlock is dead?
I think I probably was expecting something to happen, but I didn't know what it was. Um, yeah, because again, there was a whole thing about they might not come back for another season because they're off doing different things, and Benedict Cumberbatch's star was still on the rise. He hadn't got like the big Marvel roles or anything yet. Um, but I was confident there would be another one because it's like they do like three every 2 years or every 18 months. So I was pretty confident we'd get another one.
Do you think that Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss knew that they were going to open up this hornet's nest when they did what they did with Sherlock? Do you think that they purposely did it this way so people could spend the next 18 months talking about how the hell Sherlock could possibly get out of this? Do you think that they did that intentionally?
Oh yeah, I think it's. I think the reveal is a massive troll of the audience. Some shows are either big enough that they can do it or small enough that they can do it. You couldn't really do it with a middling sort of show.
When we do find out how he does it, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's it's pl- uh, it's plausible, but when you really think about it, it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, I mean, he never specifically says and gives every detail of it. It's just sort of you see how it could be done. You don't see how it was done. Yeah, I think when people give a theory, he sort of either goes along with it or corrects it and says, "Well, you're wrong about this part." But I don't think anything that specific. But yeah, it's you see the blanks get filled in, but you don't see every detail. So there could be different versions that mash up. Like you get those movies like that Black Mirror episode Bandersnatch, where you can decide where you want to go. So I think
Right,
that's what he
right.
was doing. He was just putting all these theories together.
What are you excited to see in the next season of
I
Sherlock?
think towards the end of season 3, there's another villain who I quite like. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that one. I can't remember what the second episode's about, and obviously the third one is just picking up where we left off here.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll be interested to see how I react to the next episode and see if my opinion of it is at the same place as where it was the last time I watched it.
I particularly can't wait to talk about the resolution to this giant cliffhanger. If you had to grade this episode between, from 1 to 10, what would you give it?
I'd give it a 9 out of 10.
I love this episode so much. It was so, so great. So with that being said, I will give it a 10. So you give it a 9 and I'll
There
give
you
it a
go.
10. It was great. If the folks at home want to talk to you about whatever online, be the best place for them to find you.
You can find me on YouTube if you search The Geek in Review, or I'm on Twitter as The Geeks Reviews. That's all the one word.
All right, guys. And if you want to find me to chat about Sherlock or anything else, you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But thank you guys so, so much for hanging in with us and, watching us talk about one of my favorite British shows of all time, Sherlock. But until next time, as always, we'll see you when we see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.